Greetings, East Africa, and thank you for choosing NTV this morning. Now, this is Your World, a platform that sheds light on issues that are part and parcel of your day-to-day. Now, speaking of which, today we delve into the world of house helps. You could call them house managers, others call them nannies, or to widen the scope, domestic managers. They say every household has had an unforgettable experience with them, either while growing up or bringing up their children today. Now, a lot of the drama we hear, or what some call nanny chronicles, are based on the boundaries put in place or a lack thereof in the home. So this morning, we try and figure out why, in some cases, why is such a good relationship between an employer and employee ends up to be so ugly. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and this is Your World. As I mentioned, we talk about your domestic workers and where you draw the line. Well, let's focus on our conversation of the day. We are trying to understand domestic workers' boundaries. And this is a conversation that is interestingly, that was born actually from a previous conversation we had last year when we were trying to understand the welfare of domestic workers within a pandemic. So a lot of you wrote to us and said, how about we have those conversations that most people have amongst themselves but are so critical in keeping the peace in a homestead, especially between an employer and an employee. So this morning, let's talk about that and be very candid about it, even as we talk about the same. Now, to help us with this conversation, I am joined by Edith Morogo in studio. She is the CEO at the Center for Domestic Training. We are also joined virtually by Dr. Jane Kiari. She is a counseling psychologist. In the other studio, we're joined by Joyce Muikali, who is a domestic worker, and also Julia Awinja, who is a domestic worker too. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on this very crucial conversation. And even before we get to hear from the domestic workers themselves, Edith, I think from where you sit, you have a good perspective, both as an employer and also a trainer.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what exactly are househelp boundaries?
Thank you so much for inviting me to the studio. As you heard, my name is Edith Morogo, and I've had experience working with domestic workers and their employers for the past 2 decades. So with domestic workers, the relationship is just like every other relationship that one can have. But I think this is one of the most important relationships that we can have in life because it is very, very intimate, in the sense that it happens under certain wall perimeters in the house. You're breathing the same air, you're living under the same roof, you're pretty much going through life the same way. So, and there are so many areas that can create conflict in this relationship. So if it is not properly safeguarded, if it is not properly guided, if there are no clear terms and conditions of engagement, then obviously things are bound to go haywire. And that is why we see a lot of problems. But I attribute them to maybe lack of clear-cut boundary demarcations in the homes.
Okay.
So there are many areas that we need to bring in these boundaries so that we can have a good working relationship that can promote a good relationship in the household.
Okay, and we'll talk more about those boundaries in a moment. Let's bring in the psychologist in this conversation. Jane, when you think about boundaries and how, of course, over the years, we've had interesting stories of what happens between an employee and an employer within a household, where do you draw the line? Even you as a mother, I'm sure you've had a couple of domestic workers.
Wow. Thank you, Gladys, for bringing me to the studio this morning. I'm so grateful. Just like Edith has said, every family should have what we call a very healthy family structure. And when we talk of a healthy family structure that safeguards everybody in a family, we are talking of every family having what we call defined rules, defined roles and boundaries such that everybody joining that family is aware of what are the patterns in this family. I, as a domestic worker, as I come to this family, what are the patterns in this family? What are the space? Who is in which space? As I come in as a domestic worker, what is my space? But Gladys, you'll agree with me. Most of our families lack what we call family structures. Of course, we know families have different subsystems where we have the parental subsystem, we have the spousal subsystem, the parent-children subsystem, then the siblings, and then we have the visitors that come in. Where do they join in? But as we look at this topic today, as we ask ourselves about the domestic workers' boundaries, I think the great question we should be asking ourselves this morning, as this domestic worker joins my family, what are the boundaries? So that even as I join this family, the orientation I go through at the beginning, the mother or the couple should be able to explain to the domestic workers, as you join us, this is how we do things in this family. This is the father's space. This is the mother's space. These are the children's space. And this is your space. And that will ensure that this domestic worker does not close the boundaries.
Okay,
and I'm sure
Jane,
as we continue with this, we'll be looking at that.
definitely,
Yes,
definitely. So even as we continue with this conversation here on Your World, we sent out our teams around the streets to just find out what exactly you think boundaries are within your home, and who should do what or who shouldn't do what. And these were the streets of Nairobi, and this is what you had to say.
I think some of them is in terms of the work they do. Most of them, they are laborers that come. So you have to clearly set, some tasks for them. But at times you find most of those tasks cannot be done. Like you need to iron the clothes are not ironed. You need to wash the room thoroughly. It's not done. So I think for me, it's been diverse experience. There's that one who will come and from morning they did a nice job. There's another like, I think we had an instance whereby she was not washing the device. So can you imagine for 4 months you think the device has been washed. So only for you to realize one day how come the device has been washed so quickly. So I was like, it was not sunny. So going to check, she's like, no, we have not been washing. So even we put the device in the laundry basket, then it's returned. So
kwangu kwa sibagui. Kama ni chakula bora imeiva, sina ubaguzi, mara nani amepika. Shida langu kubwa bora ni shibe. Sitaki kujua kwa sababu yeye ni binadamu. Asipopika na bibi apike, usibague.
Tuwa na househelp, what you need to do is set boundaries. Sababu once umekuwa friendly na huyo househelp wako, everything just inaenda tu hayawaya, you see. So mwambie kuamka ni this time, kulala ni this time. So for my househelp, anamkanga by 6, 10 amelala. Haya, number 2, chakula imeiva, mtoto wako sawa, like kila kitu kiko tu sawa. Yeah, but usikuwe friendly na househelp wako. Mtakosana. Mkiwa friendly atakuwa ni kama sasa sister yako, you see. Anakuja anakaa hapo na bwana yako, mna watch. It is not advisable.
Those are some of your views, even as we sought to understand exactly what boundaries are these that you've put in your house and experiences you've had with your domestic worker. Remember, our question of the day to you is, what is the worst experience you've had with a domestic worker? Could be a nanny, a house help, a farm hand, could be a gardener. That bracket actually takes in a lot of those that are within your compound or your home. And you can talk to us on social media. That is #NewNormal, or call us using that number at the bottom of your screen. So we are talking about the domestic workers. Let's hear from some of them. Now, I'll start off with you, Joyce. Joyce, umefanya kazi ya nyumbani miaka ngapi?
Kwa miaka 12 saa hii.
Okay, na umekuwa ukifanya kazi ya kuishi ama ile ya kila siku?
Kazi ya kuishi nilifanya kitambo sana. Nikiwa 15, I got pregnant when I was 15. So sikuwa na choice, nikafanya kazi ya nyumba. but nilifanya 3 houses which I didn't had a good experience at all. So from there sijawahi fanya tena kazi ya kulala.
Aha, na ukisema haukuwa na experience nzuri, what did you go through?
I went through sexual violence. Yeah, for 3 houses, the man of the house wanted to rape me. So vile niliona hiyo experience nikasema kazi ya kuishi wacha niwache kabisa.
Aha, na ilikuwa inafanyika kila wakati kwa sababu ulikuwa mchanga ama shida ilikuwa nini?
I don't know, cause nyumba ya kwanza yenye nilikuwa when bibi alienda job, so huyo mwanaume alikuwa anafanyanga job usiku, so the rest of the day tuko na yeye hapo kwa nyumba. So sijui what happened, but the only thing nilikuwa naosha vyombo kwa kitchen. Nikiosha vyombo, he came in akajifanya anataka kukunywa maji, but in real sense hakuwa anakunywa maji. So akanishika akani push against the fridge. So I screamed, one of the neighbors akakuja, and that's how I left the house.
And how was the experience with the other 2 homes?
The other 2 homes, one hata hii ya pili sikukaa hata 1 week. The man was a drunkard. So he used to come at night. Maybe the time that he wanted to rape me alikaa kitu saa 6 ya usiku. So si unajua wako na bedroom yao, mimi nilikuwa nalalanga hapo kwa sitting room. So when he found me there, akafungua blanketi, then akanishika na nguvu. So I had to scream, ndio madam akasikia, akateremka, then he stopped. So mi asubuhi nikaambia madam, I won't stay in this house again. Nikatoka nikaenda. So the last house now ilikuwa kijana wa hiyo nyumba, alikuwa anaenda college. So anaenda college, mchana anataka kushinda hapo. So unajua tuwezi kaa kwa room mahali pamoja. So mimi nilikuwa nikimaliza kazi, naenda mahali nalala, nakaa hapo. So akakuja akitaka kuniitisha, alikuwa anajifanya anakuja kuniambia niende nimpakulie chakula cause it was lunch time. Kumbe si food anataka. So kuenda kufungua mlango, mimi mahali nilikuwa nalala, he entered the house, the room. So bahati mzuri nikamsukuma akaanguka na nikatoka nje. So nikatoka nikaitisha phone, nikapigia madam, nikamwambia what happened. Yeah.
Na wakati ulikuwa unaambia hawa madams kile kinaendelea, walikuwa did they believe you? Walikuwa na kuamini?
Only the one madam believed me. Cause ananiambia huyu wa mwisho sasa alikuwa ananiambia huyo mtoi wake used to abuse house helps sana.
Oh, okay. Sawa. So kutoka siku hiyo sasa haujaifanya kazi ya kuishi?
No, mimi sikutaka tena kazi ya kuishi cause pia kazi ya kuishi ni challenging sana. Unaamka 5, wewe ndo unalala the last one. Unaamka the first one, then unalala ukiwa wa mwisho. So unapata umechoka, but unajua kazi ya kuishi, maybe unaingia 8, unatoka by 5. So you have your time to.
Ile kazi ya kila siku. Unaingia saa 2, unatoka saa 11.
Yeah.
Okay, sawa. Let's hear from Julia. Julia, umefanya kazi ya nyumbani miaka ngapi?
Kwa miaka 9.
Na umefanya ya kuishi na ya kwenda kila siku?
Nimefanya zote.
Okay, na kwa experience yako ni gani afadhali?
Ya kwenda na kurudi.
Kwa nini?
Kwenda na kurudi iko sawa, kwa maana unakuja nyumbani unashughulikia jamii yako.
Na sasa wakati haukuwa na jamii, ulikuwa unafanya vipi?
Hata we mwenyewe unajua ujipange na vitu za kwako.
Okay, na sasa ushawahi kuwa na experience mbaya na yule ambaye amekuandika kazi?
Experience mbaya, kazi yenye nilikuwa naishi ni ilikuwa unafanya kazi, saa ingine saa 6 inafika hujaenda kulala. Haya, ikifika asubuhi, wewe ndio unaamushwa, unashughulikia mzee, unaambiwa hadi umtafutia hata inner pants zenye atavaa akienda kazini. Sasa nilikuwa naona kazi ngumu, kwa maana anakuambia hii imatch na nguo yenye anavaa. Na sasa wewe huwezi jua mtu atamachi gani. Sinitakana bibi mwenyewe ajue bwanangu anataka aende kazini, atavaa nguo hizi na hizi. Tena ya kuishi pali niliona ni uzito, sikuwa nakubaliwa kuosha nguo zangu hapo. Unaishi hapo. Sasa utakaje na nguo chafu? Ukikaa na nguo chafu unaona utakuwa na bad smell. Sasa inabidi ukue clean. Haya kutoka hata kuota jua ilikuwa ni shida. Utashinda kwa nyumba the whole day, hata kama umemaliza kazi hakuna kutoka nje. Alafu tena kureceive phone ilikuwa ni shida. Unakaa bila kureceive phone. Kuna watu wanakutafuta, pengine kwa nyumba kuna shida imetokea na hawezi kukupata kwa simu. Sasa unashangaa uko wapi? Kwa maana nitakana mtu akupea hata freedom, hata kama ni off, juu mtu anakukazia na kuambia kuna off.
Okay, na sasa wakati walikuwa nakuambia hawezi osha nguo zako, reason ilikuwa ipi?
Sasa hata sijui ni shida, juu hapo ndio ilifanya nikatoka, juu nilimuuliza nisipoosha nguo zangu nitatumiaje nguo? Mimi nafanya kazi mzito na sweat, nitatumiaje nguo the whole week 2 weeks bila kuosha?
Okay, now just listening to Julia and Joyce, clearly you can tell this boundaries story is two-sided, both from the help and from their employer. So from your experience, from what you've had, what are those obvious boundaries that the employer crosses just because they're the ones in authority?
I think the first thing that is important is that before you engage a domestic worker, it's important to have a contract of service. We are saying that we need to professionalize this relationship so that it's not just a casual or an informal relationship, or what we call kienyeji relationships, you know, where things are by word of mouth. So have a written contract, and this is a contract that you give after an interview. Remember, you need to interview the domestic worker again thoroughly to ensure that this is a good fit for your household. And during the interview, you'll also have given them an opportunity to ask any questions that are important to them. Once that happens, now establish the rules and regulations for your household, assuming now that you have agreed. So take them through the rules and regulations, because this is what is going to govern them, because we are talking of boundaries here. Without established terms and conditions, rules and regulations, then you cannot even be able to talk about boundaries in the first place. Then once that happens, then now you have established a level playing field where now both of you can actually now operate, whereby now you know your limits, you know your obligations, you know your responsibilities, and likewise for the domestic worker, they also know their boundaries, their limits, and what is expected of them. Then I think that way now, that relationship is well governed, and the two parties now can perform.
Okay,
Yeah.
but in this case, we're having people infringing into other people's rights
Yeah.
and spaces.
Yes.
In the case of Joyce, I mean, it's so obvious that somebody thought just because they are the employer, they could do anything with her.
We need to do a lot of education on both the employer and the employee. Our organization now, to fight this, we have recently launched an app. This app is supposed to be guiding and to provide resources to both the employer and the employees, because we realize there's nothing out there that is guiding employers and employees. There are no reference points. There's no knowledge out there on how you are expected to relate with your domestic worker. It is generally assumed that every employer is someone who is knowledgeable. Yet you know that even with employers, like in the corporate sector and other places, employers use certain codes of conduct, ethics at the workplace to govern workers. But in the households, we have nothing. So we really need to start professionalizing, you know, the relationship. You know, we want domestic worker to be a professional craft. We need to professionalize it. We need people with the skills to come in. Also, the employers to be well educated about how to govern their homes. You'd think that a home is a place that can just run kienyeji, but basically from where I sit, I believe that we need to take our homes more seriously, especially us women, you know, because we are the ones who are mostly in charge of the relationship with the workers at home. So we need to take it more seriously, establish these rules and regulations, educate our workers, educate ourselves on how to manage. It's not everybody who can manage another human being. Some people have, of course, weaknesses, you know, like they are not patient, they are not accommodating, they are not teachers, they don't care, you know. There's a lot of training that you need to do at the household level. Even if someone comes and says that they have been trained elsewhere, you still need to induct them for your household. So as an employer, you need certain skills actually to be able to manage and to govern this person without abusing them. The ladies are talking about abuse. You see, they went into the homes. Joyce has just said how young she was. You can imagine at 15, you're pregnant. You have gone through so much in life. You're looking for a place to go and earn a decent living to take care of your baby, you know. But the minute you land there, somebody else takes you, you know, and starts abusing you. You're very vulnerable at that point. So let us agree that we all need now to start reviewing the relationship with our workers so that we can bring in some form of guidance and mwelekeo so that we just don't run these households kienyeji. I can tell you a number of instances, maybe we can talk about that later, on behavior that we have observed that doesn't work in the homes.
Yes, we'll get to that in a moment. Now, Jane, you've listened to our domestic workers, and clearly there are some boundaries that perhaps are okay with the employer, but clearly do not sit well with the employee. And most of them are saying these are the things that made them say, "Hii kazi ya kuishi siwezi fanya tena." So at that point, because this person really wants to eke a living and they're going through all these things, what is bound to happen to this domestic worker?
Thank you, Gladys. Listening to the two, Joyce and Awija, like you are saying, you pick quite a lot of what is happening in our homes with domestic workers. And listening to what Edith has said, I am imagining you get a domestic worker that is so trained from their organization, who knows what to do and what to do, who is well equipped in family management skills. But she comes to a home like you're saying, that has no healthy boundaries or has no defined rules, roles, and regulations, patterns that governs a family. She comes, finds she can, the space even where she's not supposed to get to, like what Awija has said, in the bedroom to prepare for the clothes of the father in the morning. And she has to organize what this man is to put on. Definitely, that is not part of her role. That is not her responsibility. But as she gets there, you and me can imagine what will happen. At the end of the day, she's the one who is managing what this man is eating, what this man is wearing, even probably she's the one warming the water, taking to the bathroom. In the process, without knowing all, at the end of the day, you will realize she'll become something else, apart from the domestic worker that she was meant to be. And that again, like Edith is saying, takes us back to what are the rules, the roles. What is my space as I come to your family? And these boundaries needs to be clearly outlined, because if they are not there, remember, even as these domestic workers come to your home, some of them are well trained. They'll automatically outdo you. So if you don't take care, the next thing you will realize, she's the one who's taken over even the disciplining of your children. She's taken over even the caring of your husband. Before long, definitely Gladys, you will realize she has closed boundaries. She has either become a co-wife or a side chick to your husband. But it's all because you have not defined your roles. You yourself, you've left a space. And most of these domestic workers simply, they come to fill in the gap. So as they fill in these gaps, you can see now what happens. And then at the end of the day, some of them even leave your place, either depressed or even stressed, because they're also doing what they're not supposed to be doing. So it's very, very important we really come up clearly with what are these boundaries and how do we maintain them. The issue of integrity, even in families, like you are saying, yes, you as the mother or as the wife, you may even come and give her the orientation. This is your space. These are your boundaries. but the man you have in the house, or even the wife you have in the house. Because like you're saying, we even have the gardeners. We have all these sorts of people in our houses. How are we enacting? How are we enforcing these boundaries as a couple? Because the man may enforce, but what of the wife? The wife may enforce, but what of the man? So I think these are the things we are talking of. As families, we need to sit and agree, and the issue of integrity has to come in.
Okay, now clearly it takes two to tango. We are asking you on our question of the day, what is the worst experience you've had with your domestic worker? Hashtag new normal. You're already talking to us. If you can have some of those feedback. We have Edon Kibet who says, not boundaries, but work limits. House helps shouldn't wash and cook for me. That's why I married, and that's in capital. I want to be proud of my wife. All my clothes should be done by my wife. Kibet has spoken. All right. Manuel Kipto says, from the onset, make sure you have an employer-employee relationship. Excessive familiarity, especially being too chatty with your house help, opens the doors to disrespect. Your house help should not be your gossip buddy or confidant. Kipto, very well said. And as I said, we went to the streets to find out more about what you think about this subject. And this is what you had to say.
I had one that used to mistreat my kid when he was only 1.5 years old. So she used to tell the kid to sleep by force. As in, all the time when I was calling the house, she could just tell me the baby is sleeping. Whenever I tell her, can you speak to my baby? She was like, no, he's sleeping. So I asked her, how comes he sleeps? Every time I call, you're telling me the baby is sleeping. So there's a time I just left the office. I went back home without telling her. When I reached home, I found out she was in the bedroom sleeping with the kid. So I knocked the door. She didn't open immediately. She took so long. So I called her cell phone. I told her I'm at the door, just open. So when she opened, she was shocked because she didn't expect me to come back home. So I saw the kid was so dull. He wasn't happy. And then she didn't even feed him. I found that she just gave her morning porridge and no lunch because I used to make food for my kid before.
Okay, so that is an experience from one of the employers who says that they found out the house help wasn't feeding their child. When she leaves, she goes to bed with the child, and throughout the day, they don't really cater for them. And I think this is one of the thorns in most employers' flesh. And let me hear from Julia. Watu wanasema especially ikija watoto wao, hapo ndio shida huwa nyingi sana. Umepewa kazi, umeambiwa hivi ndio vile kumtunza huyu mtoto, lakini yule mama ama yule bwana akienda kazini, wewe unasema utafanya vitu the other way around. Kwa nini watu hufanya vitu kama hizi?
Sasa hapa wacha niseme kila mtu ako na tabia yake. So long as mimi nimekuja kazi na naelewa kazi yangu ni ipi. Inafaa mtoto kama nimeachiwa nitunze mtoto. Kwa sababu kama saa hii mimi niko na experience about child care. Najua venye nitatunza mtoto wa mtu, nimtunze vyema jinsi mimi naweza penda wangu navyo atunzwe. Siwezi tesa mtoto wa mtu, nitamlinda tu venye ameniambia. Na kuna lingana na watoto wengine wanasumbua. Huku employer amekupea kazi mingi. Akipata kama hizo kazi zijaisha, hawezi jua mtoto alikuwa anasumbua ama ni nini. Nitakana tena wakwe watu wa understand, ajue pengine mtoto alikuwa anasumbua. Ukabesi na mtoto kwanza, ukaachana na kazi. Nitakana awe mtu wa kuelewa. Lakini akijua tu atakuja kupigia kelele, hujamaliza hii. Mimi naona beta mtu uangalie mtoto wako ametunzwa vizuri kuliko kazi fulani imeisha na mtoto ujue alikuwa wapi. Kwa hivyo nitakana wa style hapo mahali, mtu ajue. Afadhali mtu ashughulikie mtoto juu mtoto is very important. Hata ukiacha kufua nguo, afadhali ushughulikie mtoto. Kwa hivyo nitakana tena anaelewa.
Okay, lakini kuna wale ambao wakianza kazi wanakuwa lazy. Unaona, ile mama akitoka kwa sababu hakuna mtu ananiangalia na najua kazi yangu ni ya mtoto, sitafanya chochote. So mama akirudi, hata kama ulikuwa na nafasi, kwa sababu kuna wakati mtoto atalala, mbona kazi haifanyiki?
Ndipo nimesema kuna kila mtu ako na tabia yake. Mwenye umejua tu kazi yangu ni hii. Hata ukiamka mapema, unaanza na kazi yako kama ni kuosha nguo kabla mtoto hata amuke. Unajipanga na kazi zako. Ukishajipanga na kazi zako, utaona ugumu wa kazi.
Okay, now Joyce, when it comes still with the children, kuna wale tumeona kwenye news na si hapa peke yake, hata other countries, ambapo unapata msichana anapiga watoto ya kupindukia. Hata kuna wakati tumeona wengine wanaua wengine. Sasa shida inakuanga nini? Kwa sababu mtoto, jameni, ni mtoto, ni mdogo kukuliko, hata mwili ni mkubwa kumliko. Shida hutokea wapi? Mbona watu usahau that pia wana watoto wao?
Gachanja, mimi naweza sema huyo ni mtu wajui chenye anataka na ni mtu wajui kwa nini ako kwa hiyo kazi. Sababu one, ukijua unakuja kutafuta ama uko hapo sababu ya kazi, utarespect kila mtu ya employer wako. But pia kuna wale employers wako na tabia mbaya. Ukipika chakula anataka ukulie kwa kitchen, si ndio? Hataki ukule na wao. Azina ndio unamfanyia kazi but amekutenga in a way. Unaona? Kama mimi the first house nilikuwa nakulia kwa kitchen. Unaona? So pia ina depend what relationship do you have with your the both of you, the employer and the employee. Unaona? Kuna experience ingine ndio si vizuri kufanya revenge na watoto, but unajua kila mtu akona karakta yake kivyake. Unapata? But the good thing ni you sit down, you talk, unaambia employer, mimi yenyewe sifurahi ukifanya hivi. I like the first comment ya huyo mtu amesema, ndio sababu alioa, ndio bibi ampikie, amfulie nguo. Kuna some employers, mtu anakuwekea hadi panties zake umfulie. Boxers za bwana ufue. Mi huona at some point ni kama amekudharau. Unaona? Kuna madharau huwa inaingia mahali. For a long time domestic work haijachukuliwa kama any other job. And I tell you, domestic work is your security. Gachanja, sahi uko hapa, si ndio? You've let someone at home akuangalilie, akuranie house yako. That's why tunawaita siku hizi house managers, because they run everything for you to work. Si ndio? But the moment unadharau ule mtu na yeye ndio security yako, imagine umemwachia millions za vitu kwa nyumba. Unaona? Then respect na umpati the respect yenye anafaa kukua nayo. Unaona? So mtu anakuwa na machungu, anakuwa na anga, anajua wewe nitakuonyesha, but it's not a good thing. So it's better you sit down, employer and the employee, you sit down, you put everything in order, and I'm sure vitu zitaenda vile inafaa.
Okay, now I hear what Joyce and Julia are saying, but Edith, as you said, every house has rules and regulations and the boundaries and expectations of the household. So let's take an example. There's that house that the wife does not mind if the innerwears of the husband are washed by the household. Then there's another house that is our intimate space. Hata usiingie bedroom yetu, don't even wash our master bedroom. So if you have already agreed with the help from the get-go and they said okay because they really needed to do the job, then they go back on it thinking ini madharau. How now do you govern that?
I think some of these practices are not practices that work. At the point where you're engaging this domestic worker, she may accept because, as you have said, she really needs a job and she's desperate. But these are the very things that will promote conflict between that relationship. One of the things that we think does not work, and this is our learning of the last 20 years, do not ask domestic workers to wash innerwear, neither yours nor your husband's. I think it is very abusive. They shouldn't do the washing. In the event that you're sick and you're not capable of washing your own innerwear, for sick people, we already know that now we have home nurses. So we have people who can come to the home and take care of you. And those are the people now who are well trained to handle like innerwear or any other, even to wash you, your body, you know, and to assist you if you need, you have to use diapers and things like that. But if for some reason you are not incapacitated in any way, please do not ask anyone to wash your underwears because it is abusive and it makes them feel bad. As the domestic workers have already alluded, they will do it, they will feel bad, it will generate a lot of negative vibes, negative feelings in them, and it will just cause them to work with a very bad mood around the house.
Okay.
Not just that, the other things that are critical. Again, do not ask, for example, do not invite domestic workers to your bedroom to serve you with your husband. Yeah, we have women asking domestic workers to bring them tea and meals and other things, and they're right there sleeping with their husbands. So if you form this habit of inviting someone into your bedroom, the next minute, she will also feel very comfortable if she's invited into that bedroom by your husband, even in your absence. Yeah. And you never know what may happen. You may not like it. I'm sure you will not like it. Yeah. And obviously, when you come back home and you realize that she was invited into that bedroom, and I'm talking about areas where we have had to deal with these issues right head on.
Okay, this issue about eating with your domestic worker in the same space. Yes. There's some houses, even when you tell her to come sit with you, she'd rather give you your space and go into her own space. Yeah. Then there are some houses where they are critical, very categorical. Yes. Do not eat with us because I'd like this space to be for us as a family. Yes. Yes. So is that crossing the line or just a preference?
It depends on how it is done. As we said, we have rules and regulations. This is what we advocate. If she cannot sit with you there to eat, because obviously people might feel uncomfortable, and some of the domestic workers do not feel comfortable. You may invite them actually, and they may not feel happy, or they may not feel like, they will feel like you're limiting their, you know, like they may want to have a second helping, and they may not feel comfortable when you're there. So what we advocate is, as a family, serve your meals, eat your meals, and then clear the table, and then the worker can come to the same table, sit there, eat their food, finish, and then clear up. So that way, nobody will be feeling bad, and no one will experience any form of discrimination. So you may not sit together, but you can still allow them to sit on the same table after you have eaten and eat their food. Yes, and that works. That works very well.
Okay.
That works very well.
All right. And still on the issue of food, let me hear from Joyce. Kuna wale ambao wanasema tukikula tunakula chakula sisi wote, lakini kuna zile nyumba, kuna chakula ya familia alafu kuna chakula yako kando. Umepitia hayo?
Yeah. Nakumbuka kuna nyumba nilikuwa nikifanya kazi, so unapata ukiwapikia maybe meat, chicken ama fish, you eat skuma peke yake. So unapata wanakula chakula poa, wewe unakula skuma. I was eating skuma every day. Yani mboga ni either skuma, cabbage ama spinach.
Okay, na sasa hiyo wanakuambia kwa nini hauli chakula kama yao?
They pay, wanasema wanakulipa. So kama unataka kukula nyama, toa ile pesa yako, uende ununue nyama yako, uko unapika. Unapata.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I find that very disturbing, but then again, different houses, different rules. But this one I'm even wondering kama hii ni rule hata. For Julia, umepitia yapi na chakula? Kwa sababu kuna wale watasema, aki huyu hata nikimpatia chakula ina gani, bado huyu kula chakula ya mtoto. Shida wa gani?
Yes. Unajua mtu afikie kukula chakula ya mtoto, pengine hujampea chakula. Lakini ukipea mtu chakula yake na akule, hawezi tamani ile chakula ya mtoto. Alafu mimi kuna yale nilipitia, unaambiwa ni strong tea na mkate kila siku usiku ukienda kulala. Alafu unaenda unakulia nje kwa balcony, sahani zako zimetengwa, hizo zinaisha hapo nje. Haziwezi weka kwa zingine. Kijiko yako, sahani yako na sufuria yako ziko hapo nje. Sasa unafikiria kama mimi ndio nawafanyia usafi kwa nyumba, how comes vitu zangu zina stay nje? Na mimi ndio nawafanyia usafi kwa nyumba? Kwani mimi niko na uchafu kiasi gani ambapo vitu zangu zinatengwa za kula zinakaa kwa balcony?
Na ukiwauliza wanakuambia?
Sasa unajua venye tuko desperate, hata uwezi uliza. Wewe unanyamaza tu kwa sababu hujui rights zako. But for now, najua rights zangu, niko na haki ya kuuliza.
Haya, sasa hata tukiongelea kuhusu chakula. Kuna hii, unajua zile fridge kwenye nyumba jameni sio kabati, ni kwa sababu unapika chakula nyingi, mnaziweka pale kwa fridge, inakuwa rahisi hata ukifanya kazi zingine angalau unajua chakula ishapikwa. Lakini unapata wale ambao wanasema haizi kula chakula ya fridge. Kwa hivyo umeenda kazini alafu anapiga simu anasema mama, haukuniachia chakula.
Sasa chakula ukifika hapo, wewe inafaa unakula. Kama ukuli chakula ya friji utajipanga sasa, lakini kama unaweza kula chakula yenye unapewa, kwa sababu kukupea chakula si wamefurahia kukupea. Kama unaweza kula ni sawa, na kama huwezi kula itabidi uongee na wao. Kama unaweza kuwa ukijinunulia chakula chako ukijipikia.
Aha. Sawa sawa. It's interesting that this is coming from domestic workers, not employers. And Jane, I mean, you hear that there are things that happen within the household and the help is left thinking, why do you treat me as if I'm not part and parcel of this family, yet I do the most critical things for you when you're away and keep you comfortable? So psychologically, what is this house help or domestic worker going through?
Thank you, Gladys. Listening to that conversation, listening to Joyce and Awinja, it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting what is happening in some of our families, because I don't think an issue of food, Gladys, should be an area of conflict, even in our families. And like we said at the beginning, if this domestic worker comes to your family, you receive her as part of your family. Let her know, as you come to my family, you are part of this family. You are free to eat with us. Let her make her decision, whether she's comfortable eating from the kitchen or sitting with you people at the table. Let her make her choice, so that if she chooses to be eating from the kitchen, that is her choice. If she feels free to join you people, just welcome her, so that she knows she's highly valued. She's not being discriminated. She will not go through rejection, because the minute she realizes I'm also not honored, I'm also not respected in this family. When you go away, like you have not been allowing her to eat that meat, that food, and then you leave the same food for your kid or your children, you can be sure that food will not get to your children. But if she's allowed the freedom, cook whatever you want to cook, at the end of the day, you will realize some of them will even they will feel, I am valued, I am respected, I am treated with dignity in this home. And then like one of them said about why at times they are not able to even take care of the children very well, because at times we put a lot of demands and expectations for them, a lot of work. It's good to engage them, get to know what are the limits, what is this that she can do, because at times we expect in the morning, you've left, there's nothing you've done, you've not even left when you have, even helped her, maybe even take care of the children in the morning, then you expect by the end of the day, you'll find the house has been washed, all the clothes have been washed, the windows, everything has been done, the child has been taken care of. At times, we are human beings, and this house helps, and these domestic workers are also human beings. They will not be able to do all that. So what will they do? They will make sure your child probably has slept. And we have had cases where even domestic workers, maybe you'll ask Awija why they do this. They even, after the children have taken porridge or breakfast, they give them Piriton so that they sleep, so that they don't disturb me. Then I am able to do the cleaning, I'm able to do the washing. So by the end of the day, you will come and find everything has been done pretty well, but it was done at the expense of your child. It is good to engage them. Then as parents, let's also spend time with our children. It's so unfortunate that most of us, especially mothers, we have neglected our responsibilities. And I want to remind, especially the young mothers, that parenting cannot be delegated. It can be postponed. And however much that girl is good. It doesn't matter what kind of a domestic worker you have. Parenting is your responsibility. Those children are your responsibility. Those that are married, your husband is your responsibility. There are some functions, there are some roles, there are some, yes, she will cook and she will do so well, but please see how you balance. Know your children, so that even when you leave these children with this domestic worker, you know to what extent can she go. Because of course we know there are some children, even us, when we are with them during the day, when this house help, at one time maybe she's off duty, you realize there's nothing else you can do with your child. She's so disturbing, he's so disturbing. And then you expect when you are not there, probably
Yeah.
this child will not disturb. It is not possible. Let's understand our children so that as we leave them with these domestic workers, we also know how much they can do. At times, we are delegating so much, even to these house helps. And then maybe just one thing, like one of them has said,
Yes.
you know, at times some of them turn and they become brutal, even to our children. And it is important, even as you take these house girl brothers, it's good for you to examine their mental state.
Okay, allow me, Jane.
From where they are coming from. Yes.
Jane, allow
Yes,
me to
Gladys?
stop you at that point, because what you're about to talk about touches on something that is very crucial, and it's how to pick your battles within the house and the effects of the same on the help and also on you. So I'd like us to look at that right after this short break, and of course still take a lot more of your feedback, even as you tell us your experiences with your domestic workers. We'll be right back. Well, thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today we're having quite an interesting conversation here, and it's the domestic workers' boundaries. And there's a lot to be said from both fronts, from the employer and the employee's point of view. Still with us in studio, Edith Murogo. She's a CEO, Center for Domestic Training. Jane Kiarie, counseling psychologist, joining us virtually. Joyce Mwikali is a domestic worker, and Julia Winja, domestic workers, who are with us in studio this morning. And before we get back to the conversation, I hear you're talking to us, even as we asked you, what is the worst experience you've had with a domestic worker? And it's interesting how people have various experiences across board. And Domicile Herb says, people complaining to their human, I guess their HR, about conducive work environments, and at home be doing injustices to their house managers. Very true, Domicile. Rosie Lilian Otili says the help is part of a family. Yes, she is. Agola Linde says, it is demeaning to let someone wash another's innerwear, an adult for that matter. Agola, as we've heard, there are people who think it's part of clothing. Hata hiyo osha. Sylvia says, keep strong, my friend Mwikali. I know majority have gone through this, but disclosure comes as a big challenge. I clearly understand now the reason as to why you fight for SGBV cases. Okay, interesting, Joyce. Kwa hivyo unajulikana hii town, eh?
Mingi sana. That's why I trained on mentorship.
Yeah.
And I'm also a leader of domestic workers at my area. So I do a lot of things fighting for these girls.
All right.
That's why we have CDTD, which wanna train domestic workers, a professional domestic worker. So they know their boundaries, they know what they go there to do. Yeah.
Okay, and still talking about boundaries, eh? Sasa unajua hawa watu wawili wanaishi nyumba moja, lazima watakosana at some point,
kawaida,
right? Si ndio?
Yeah.
Lakini sasa inakuwa inapita kiasi ambako the employer has left, employee ameachwa, sasa anataka kulipisha kisasi. Shida upitia wapi? As in, ni vipi tunaweza pitia maisha kawaida lakini tusikosane ile idadi ya kufanyiana madharau?
Yeah. Mi kitu naweza sema, most of the employers huwa hawataki kuambiwa, si ndio? Uko hapo umeenda kufanya kazi, anajua anakulipa, we ni umfanyie kazi mlipane, si ndio? But whenever una undergo any pressure in that house, when you want to tell the employer, anakuambia, si ulikuja kutafuta kazi, so fanya kazi yako. Then kuna ule employer mzuri anaweza kaa akusikize. Mi niko na employer ashainiacha kwake mwezi mzima, ameenda Ethiopia. Unaona? Because we had a good relationship. Hatukuwa gossip buddies. Like another person said, but the relationship we had, as in alikuwa amenipatia space yangu. Niko kwake, yes, but ana respect privacy yangu. Unaona? Then anajua hii kitu ikiniumiza, namwambia hapa haiendi vizuri, so ananiuliza unataka tufanye aje. Unaona? Even communication is key also. Sababu huyo mtu umemchukua anakuja kuishi hapo for a long time. Either anakuja kuishi ama unataka kufanyia kazi for a long time. Ndio unapatanga some employers huwa hawakai na domestic workers. Not that they are bad. Kuna kwangana two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
Unaona? So communication matters a lot.
Okay, so Joyce, I hear what you're saying, but Julia, kuna wale ambao sasa msichana wa kazi amekuja, umempatia the instructions of what to do, alafu hataki kufanya vile unataka, anataka kufanya vile yeye anajua, yet kila nyumba iko different. Sasa hapo tutafanya nini?
Hapo ni venye huyo msichana ajielewi kazi yake. Kwa hivyo nikikuja kwako mpaka wewe unipee masharti ya nyumba yako. Mimi siwezi ingia hapo na masharti yangu. Kwa sababu hapo sio kwangu. Ukisema unataka nguo mrefu zivaliwe, inabidi nivae, ama ununue uniform unipee mimi nivae. Nifuate masharti, na kuna communication about employer and employee. Unisikize na mimi nikusikize. Kuna wengine hawataki akusikize. Anataka tu yeye awe ndiye anashout hata uwezi ongea na ajue unafinyika wapi ama shida iko wapi. Lakini ukiongea muelewane, atajua shida iko hapa na mtatatua. Hautakuwa na kelele na mtaelewana.
Aha, na sasa umegusia kitu kingine, maneno ya kuvaa uniform ama usivae uniform. Hey, hii imeleta shida jameni. Sasa kuna wale wakiambiwa wavae uniform wanasema jameni, mbona unanitenga? Lakini kuna wale ule mama anasema hiyo skirt unavaa ukiinama mzee wangu anaona vitu ambazo hatakaniwi kuona. Tufanye aje, Joyce?
So mi usema your house your rules. Unajua, ukiniambia nivae uniform takuja. At the end of the day I'm there to work. Unaona? So mi nimesema ni a conversation should be taken between the employer and the employee. Tusikizane. Kama unataka nivae nguo refu mpaka chini, I will. Because I'm there to work. I don't have a hidden agenda. Unaona? So whatever tuna agree, wacha ikue hivyo.
Aha, lakini sasa unaona it takes two people understanding each other on the rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, we should. That's why I'm saying the employer and the employee should have a conversation. Communicate. If una feel na vango zinanishika na mzee wako ananiangalia in a certain way na sigundui, tell me, niambie kuanzia kesho nataka ukuwe unavaa dera, si ndio? I will.
Okay, interesting perspective here. And again, I say, I'm glad we are hearing this from domestic workers so that we understand that they also are receptive to criticism and positive criticism at that. So in this case, from your experience, when it comes to how you correct your domestic worker, how you're able to resolve conflict, what's the best way?
As we said, and as we are emphasizing, I think we are all in agreement now that we need the rules and regulations to govern the relationship. And as part of that, you need to have a conflict resolution mechanism in your house. Like, how do you deal with conflict? You know, knowing that this relationship, as I said, is very intimate, and there are so many points of conflict. So one of the things that I've told women employers, and me being one of them, we are where we are today because of the domestic worker. It is the domestic workers who have enabled us to pursue our own career growth and personal growth and development. So without them, really, we cannot be. So because of that, then we really need to manage this relationship very professionally to the advantage of both parties, so that it is a win-win situation. So in the first instance, I would say, evaluate yourself as an employer. What is your temperament? You know your temperament. You know if you're the kind of person who flares up at every small thing or excuse. Are you patient? Are you accommodating? I had said these things before. Who are you as an employer? What is your character? What are your values as a person? Then from there, look at the worker themselves, the worker that you brought into your house. How are they? Can they take stress? Can they take the heat? Can they take the pressure? I mean, is this someone who wants to learn? Is this someone who appreciates correction? Or is this someone who does not want to be corrected? Because we have those as well. I think it is an aspect of human beings. Even on the other side, there are some employers, as Joyce has alluded, who do not want to be told, hawataki kuambiwa. They think that they have nothing to learn from a domestic worker. So once you have established all those, so you know yourself as an employer and who you are and even how other members of the households are, and then again, you know the domestic worker, what they can take and what they cannot take, then that way, then you can establish a way of handling conflict in the household. We advocate that the two parties sit together. You evaluate what has happened. You talk about it. Let someone know that they have crossed the boundary. So if you are the one who, or your other agents, like your husband or your children, who has crossed the boundary, then of course deal with it in a way that you restore the relationship, because surely you need each other, and you have to come from a point of respect, so that at least the domestic worker also feels respected and appreciated, and that when you correct, you're correcting with love and concern. It's not like you're correcting, ukimfukuza we toka, enda kabisa. No. You just deal with conflict, because it will always arise, and it is geared, the way you handle it will determine the relationship that you'll have.
Yeah. And speaking about relationships, going back to the children and the handling of the same, there's somebody who is asking, at what age should the house help stop bathing the children? And this is because it has been reported that there are some domestic workers that abuse the children in this way. Julia, kwa zile kazi umefanya, watoto ulifika umri upi alafu ukaambiwa sasa wachana kuosha mtoto?
Watoto anafika hata miaka 13 hajajua kujiosha.
Ala. 13 years.
13 years, yes.
So unamuosha akiwa teenager?
Teenager, yeah.
Aje sasa?
Tunaenda naye unamuosha, sasa unaanza kumfunza, kwa sababu akiwa na 10 years unaambiwa bado ni mtoto. Sasa wewe itabidi venye mzazi anataka mtoto wake alelewe, itabidi wewe umlee venye anataka.
Okay. Na wakati unafanya kazi kama hiyo, wewe mwenyewe unapitia yapi?
Unaona ni magumu, kwa sababu ukijaribu kutaka kumfunza ataona unatesa mtoto. Juu once mzazi amesema asioge mwenyewe umuogeshe, mtoto amesikia hiyo. Sasa inabidi umuogeshe jinsi ameambiwa. Juu mtoto anaambiwa, ndio sasa mtoto anakuwa yeye ndio anakokomandi wewe sasa.
Okay. All right, that is a strange phenomenon. Okay, and how about the sleeping in the same room with kids, which has also been said as a loophole that gives life to sexual abuse to the children? Joyce, what's your experience with this? Hii maneno ya kulala na watoto?
Mi si advocatingi ati uache house help na watoto wako. Kama uko na rooms mingi, wacha alale sitting room. House help, wacha alale sitting room. Kama una feel hauna an extra house, wacha watoi walale peke yao, cause you never know. Mtu labda umemkosea mchana. Unajua kuna watu huwa wanaweka anga ndani yao. And they have to revenge. Nimekwambia different people with different characters. So you never know what they can do to your child usiku.
Okay, lakini sasa kuna wale ukiwaambia walale kwenye sitting room, kwa sababu sasa unajua nyumba haina rooms nyingi, anasema ana feel anatengwa. Unaona? Lakini sasa unajaribu pia yeye akue comfortable. Sasa tufanyeje jamini?
Kila kitu ni kuagree. As I said before, let's agree on these things. Wewe uko hapo kufanya job, si ndio? Utakuwa comfortable. Sorry to say so, ukienda kwako utakuwa comfortable. Wewe fanya kazi yako. Leave a good impression kwa your employer, because I'm sure ikifika time atake kurefer kwa mtu mwingine atakurefer. Me I work through referrals. Unaona? Because kuna mtu nilifanyia kazi akaona nimefanya kazi mzuri, so ananiitia beshte yake namfanyia kazi. So we leave a good we fanya kazi yako yenye imekupeleka hapo.
Okay, now, Daktari, I'm sure you're listening to this, and this is a very pertinent issue in homes. Sexual abuse, children who've gone through so much and for years never said what happened to them in the hands of their domestic worker. Talk about this.
Beautiful, Gladys, quite interesting. These things happen. These things have been happening. We hear them every day, even as we do counseling in our offices. And like Awija is saying, it is very, very important for employers to have a working relationship with their domestic workers. If you can, be a friend to your domestic worker. And like she has said at the beginning, there need to be defined boundaries. Let them be communicated. Review them once in a while. After this lady has worked, after this domestic worker has worked for a month or some weeks, sit again, remind her what you agreed at the beginning, and then let's safeguard our children. Like you are saying, it is very, very important. Let not even the domestic worker, even the visitors we receive in our homes, at times even our own relatives, the cousins, the aunties, the uncles, some of them, they don't have the values we uphold in our families. So when they come, don't allow them to sleep with your children. Even if they are to share a room, not the bed. Let your children have the separate bed. I know most of us, we have this habit. Visitors come to your house, so it is your children to move from their bedroom so that the visitors can sleep well. Let the visitors know they are the visitors. Don't move your children from their bed for the visitors to sleep there, or for the relatives to sleep there. Let them sleep. If there is no other room, just get even the chair in the sitting room, or get the mattress. Let them sleep in the sitting room. You know, some of us, we also make these people so comfortable in our houses at the expense of our children. So let the domestic workers know, right from day one, you don't allow your children to share a bed with visitors. They don't even share the room, so that if they're not comfortable sleeping where you have shown them to sleep, then let them leave, and then you can get someone who you can work with. Because at times you can't compromise your values. You can't compromise the comfort of your children, because it is these gaps, like we are saying, it's these gaps at times we create that even these domestic workers take advantage of. And like what Awija has said, at times you've closed with this domestic worker, and because you see, of course, she can't transfer to you her anger, she'll automatically transfer her anger to your children. So safeguard your children. Create the boundaries also between you and the domestic workers. As you train your children, you know, the toilet training, train them also how to wash themselves. Personally, I don't think after 4 or 5 years, this child should be able to clean themselves and to dress themselves. Because it is in the process of cleaning and all that, we have had, most children have also been introduced to some of this sexual abuse. And remember, like I said at the beginning, examine this domestic worker as they come to your house. Examine their mental state, because some of them, they also psychologically, they could be unstable. Emotionally, they could be unstable. And at times, if you just leave them to take care of your children with their instability, then they'll do a lot of mess to your children. Check, some of the symptoms we talked about. As you stay with them, get to examine them. How are they psychologically, emotionally? Are they stable mentally? Are they people who you can really trust? Check even, what are they watching even while you are away with your children? What are their values? Are they the values you uphold in your family? Understand where this domestic worker is coming from, because some of them are also coming from dysfunctional families. And if they are coming from dysfunctional families, especially if she has not been trained, you can expect you'll have a lot of issues with this house girl, even as she works with your children. It's very, very important to understand where are they also coming from.
Very well said, and a great food for thought. Still taking your feedback even as we take in your experiences with your domestic workers. Hashtag that is new normal. And remember, you can still call in. Robert Alu says, I don't agree with the lady who suggests that the house help should eat after the rest of the family. Why? Of course not. We have said, I mean, she's human as you are. You might as well treat her as part of the family. Anthony Mwanier says, listen for their interests, not just their position. That is a very good point, and we'll talk about empowerment. Selina Katumanga says, may God bless house helps. Indeed, may he continue to bless them. Robinson says, one stubborn house help once washed innerwear of a couple water that with water that had been soaked with pepper. Hey! It was funny to see the couple shout at night. The couple reported the worker to the police, but the message was loud and clear. Hi, Javedi. Mike Dad says, you are right. House helps shouldn't wash underwears, not even handkerchief. Hiya. Jocelyn Marketti says, it's a win-win situation. Respect them. They respect you. That way you will stay with them for quite a while. Put your rules from day one so that she knows your do's and don'ts. I think that has been reiterated enough times. Lucy says, in 2002, after high school, I worked as a housemaid to care for my ailing mom, support my brothers, and save money for further education. Unfortunately, the family I worked for was so mean to me, overworked me, and I was even lucky if they paid me because often they did not. Lucy Polesana, and as it's been said that there are some people who have gone through or met very cruel employers. And now that earlier we had touched on familiarity, being careful about that, being too familiar with your employee. How much is too much? Wacha tuanze sasa with salaries. We all know that there is a minimum wage for all house helps. Alafu sasa umepatana na an employer ambaye anasema nitakuongezea kitu on top of that. Sawa na mnaishi maisha vizuri, ikifika end of the year anakupatia bonus na hata anakuongezea kitu juu yake sababu anajua unarudisha watoto shuleni. But instead of getting better at your job, you start growing a big head. Joyce, tufanyeje?
Hiyo ni ngumu kidogo. Anyway, when you do good to people, they should do good to you. Because at the end of the day, una think about the well-being of that house help. Because ni wachache. Mtu akupee mshahara yako uende vile unaenda, kama ni December, January urudi kazi. But huyu mtu ameenda to an extreme mind, kukufanyia shopping, maybe. Amekupatia mshahara yako yote, na amekupatia bonus mpaka. So what else do you want?
Haya, alafu kuna wale pia ukiongezewa kitu you keep asking for money kila wiki. Nisaidie na ukiambiwa itakatwa kwenye mshahara unanuna. Sasa tufanye?
So hapo ni muagree. Ndio Jane amesema, from the word go, put your rules on the table. As in mwambie, mimi katikati ya mwezi labda sipatangi pesa. So you will have to wait until end month. Sababu kama anaishi hapo, anakula hapo, ako sawa. So si understand pesa ya katikati. Maybe sasa akuwe na emergency that you can talk. Si ndio?
Yeah.
Because some things happen. You never know. Hapo mnaweza ongea. Na maybe unaweza msaidia. But at the end of the day, mwambie ile pesa unatumia. Kama anakuitisha do kila wakati, ni mshahara yake anatumia.
Haya, sawa. Now, Julia, kuna wale wanauliza, should I go on holiday with my domestic worker? Now that you're saying they are family members, wewe ukaambiwa na mfanyikazi, or rather your employer, ati njoo tuende na wewe na kutakupeleka Masai Mara hata wewe uji nice. Utaenda nao ama utasema afadhali hiyo pesa unipatie niende nifanye kile mimi nataka?
Inalingana. Kuna mwenye unaweza enda naye awache kama na umepanga kama jamii yako. Mwingine anakuambia tu twende, hata mshahara hajakupea, pengine uko na jamii hujawapanga. Sasa inatakana mnaongea, anakupanga anakupea hata siku mbili na wewe ende upange jamii yako mnaweza enda mpaka tuelewane. Mi akiwa na shida, juu hata mi kuna wakati naweza muomba ruhusa anipe. Sasa akitaka tuende na yeye tunaweza enda. Siwezi kataa, bora ni kuelewana.
Okay. Na sasa ulikuwa umegusia nini hapo awali kuhusu off days. Kuna wale wananyimana off days kabisa, lakini kuna pia wale wanapewa off day. Mtu anarudi saa 3, saa 4 usiku jameni na urudi kwako. Sasa watu kama utafanya nini?
Kuna ofu mtu anakutoa, tuseme kama ni Sunday, amekutoa unamfanya kazi zote unatoka kitu saa 4. Sasa mtu ukimtoa saa 4, analipisha anarudi saa 3. Juu mimi nimeshaifanya kazi natolewa saa 4. Sasa kurudi inabidi tena na mimi niingie saa 3. Ambapo sio vizuri juu kuingia kwa nyumba ya mtu usiku. Nitakana kama siku yako ni ya off, wewe uamke mapema ujipange, kama ni chai breakfast peke yake watayarishie tu na wewe by 6:30 uwe umeondoka. At least ukuwe na enough time to go to church and serve your family.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, we'll take a quick break on Your World. When we come back, I'd like to hear from Edith what actually works, because she's been doing this for over 20 years, and there's been feedback both from the employer and employee when it comes to the familiarity, how much is too much, and why this is important in ensuring that you affirm the boundaries in your home. Right after this break. It is Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today we're focusing on househelp boundaries, and there has been a lot to learn from this conversation, both from an employer's point of view and employee's point of view. Now, remember, you can reach us with your questions and comments on that number at the bottom of your screen, even as you share with us those experiences you've had with your domestic worker. And speaking of which, I'm told Michael from Wasingishu is calling. What is your question or comment?
Well, my question, let me speak in Swahili so that some of our people can be able to hear me.
Aya, endelea.
Kuna hii mjadala ni mjadala wa maana sana, lakini shida ni kwamba saa zingine hatuangalii classes, yani classes ambazo kuna watu ambao wameajiri watu mashambani ambao pia saa zingine wanatumia watu wafanyakazi vibaya, na kuna watu ambao pia wameajiriwa kwa mashamba pia ambao wanachukua ile nafasi ya waajiri wao kwa njia mbaya. Hapa ndio jambo ambalo ningeliomba tu kama ingeliwezekana mjadala kama huu uwe inawezekana watu wengi wao wanaweza kuchangia. Tuwe na wale watu ambao wanaweza kuwa na watu wako na servant quarters na wengine ambao wanaoishi na wenyewe kwa manyumba.
Sawa sawa. Asante sana kwa kuchangia na siku njema.
Asante.
Okay, we have feedback on social media, #NewNormal, if you can have that on the screen. We have a member, Nyakeri, who says, doesn't make sense treating someone who cooks for you and looks after your home and kids for you when you are absent in that manner. Well, we hear you, and that's why we are emphasizing the boundaries and, of course, other rules and regulations ensure that you keep a cohesive relationship in your home. And even as we talk about what Michael has brought up, it sounds like we're just talking to the urban setup. But really, as we're talking about domestic workers, it's not only your nanny or house help, it's also the gardener or the farmhand.
Yeah.
The same rules and regulations apply, right?
Yeah.
What's your experience?
My experience is such that employers quickly cross these boundaries. So, like for example, in the rural areas, you may find that you are actually engaged to do domestic work, but you end up now also doing the shamba work. So sometimes you're given a jembe and you're asked to go to the farm to do the work there. And then the work in the house is still waiting for you. So sometimes you need to really create that balance. The gentleman has raised a very pertinent issue of, I think, the social classes. You see, some people have servants' quarters, others may not have. And that is why, like, sometimes it is very, very difficult to give advice, because we have employers who live in two-roomed houses. So they may not actually afford to give a domestic worker a room to themselves. And yet they need these services of a living domestic worker. And that is why we say employers have to bring themselves employers have to evaluate themselves and to see how to create a good working environment in their homes, so that you can have a situation that is working. I may not have a bedroom that I can give to the domestic worker, but I may have an arrangement in my house to ensure that her rights are respected and that still she doesn't sleep with my children. So what perhaps sometimes we can do is to have more beds, so that the children are in their beds and the domestic worker also has a bed, or at least maybe a mattress or something, so that we ensure that in that environment, in that socio-economic setup where maybe I cannot afford to have a servant's quarter or an extra room or enough space, that still within the little space that we have, we can still share. We have a problem in this country because, for example, we don't have like daycare centers, we don't have a good system that for child protection, whereby, like in other countries, you find that the municipal councils, the county governments, the bigger government has provided for a comprehensive system for childcare, so that working households are properly supported when they go to work, that they can actually have safe spaces for these children. And this is what is necessitating even people who do not have enough space to actually hire live-in workers. I believe if our government can come up with a daycare center, subsidized daycare facilities, these households that are now out of desperation hiring live-in workers who they actually cannot afford will be supported, so that now in the morning they have places where they can take these children. So then they are not locked into taking decisions that end up actually being very abusive to the domestic workers.
Makes sense.
This is the way I look at it.
Yeah,
yes.
Makes a lot of sense. And Jane, let me bring you on this conversation in as far as how much is too much. Of course, you want to go out there, you want to cater for your domestic worker, you want them to be as comfortable as possible so that they can be the best employee. But then again, familiarity checks in. So how do you toe the line to ensure that they know you care, but pia tusizoeane?
Very, very, very important. Like you're saying, some of the areas of conflict, even when it comes to the employers and the employees, the domestic workers, is at times when we close those social boundaries, where at times you as a wife, you come home so stressed, and because probably you have no one to share with, maybe some of the stresses you have gone through, you end up pouring so much even to your household. At times, even your conflicts with your husband. At times, there are some of us who find it easier to share with our domestic workers more than even we share with our spouses. And at times, when they end up also getting so familiar with what is happening, you realize with time, they also get to know you so much, and respect also gets to miss in that relationship. Like you're saying, it is very, very important. Show them you care, provide for them, ensure the healthy family structure is well established. There is a healthy working relationship, but also know how much can you share with this girl. You also you need to safeguard your family. There are some things that should also not get to the domestic worker, especially when it comes to your issues with your husband. At times, even some of the issues with your children, you don't have to share them. Okay, I understand. Some of us employees, we're also going through our share of stress, depression, especially during this season of COVID-19, when life has been so difficult. But again, look for a confidant. Let the domestic worker not be your confidant, where you are sharing everything, every frustration you're going through. I know, like women really talk. Women are social beings, but know what are you sharing with your domestic worker. At the end of the day, remember, you are the employee, you have authority over her. She needs to respect you. She needs to, she needs to treat you with the dignity that deserves. But at times, we also pour so much. They get to know us so much They even get inner things they are not supposed to do. And that's why learn to share, learn to share with other people out there, but with your domestic worker, keep some things off. Let there be a boundary, the social boundaries also. Even when you are going out, of course, it's good you can give her a treat, but not always. Not always, I say so.
Interesting, Edith.
Yeah, I just want to support what Dr. Jane is saying. We have had very interesting experiences where domestic workers are even allowed to take hot drinks. Like a family goes out and of course you don't keep the boundaries, and even sometimes you have parties, you are entertaining guests, and you find that they have one too many. And then you can imagine what happens after that. And it has sometimes not played out very well. Again, we have women now who are using domestic workers to replace them in the households. Like, for example, you send a domestic worker to the kiosk to take deni, like maybe you don't have money for milk or money for bread. So instead of you going to the shop and making an arrangement with the kiosk, you send your workers there. And some of these conflicts that we're talking about, they arise from this kind of incidences. Sometimes we also have employers sending domestic workers to represent them in schools. Very important meetings, school meetings, parents' meetings. I hear even in one school, the head teacher had to write to the parents that this is not a domestic workers meeting, it is a parents meeting. So come yourself. We need to discuss very important issues to do with your children. Issues to do with the discipline. Yeah, domestic workers should not be replaced to be the ones disciplining children. So you should really partner with them and see what is the disciplinary what are the disciplinary measures that we need to be taking, and what can my domestic worker do, and what should we do as parents. So there is so much that we are leaving to the domestic workers, and when we leave them to function in certain ways, then they go out of the boundaries that we have already set, and then we start criticizing them, insulting them, and even abusing them, and yet we are the ones who overstretched these boundaries.
Okay. Now, earlier we mentioned empowerment and the importance of the same, and somebody commented that it's always good to empower your domestic worker, but then again, always keep those boundaries in check. Now, for you, Joyce, kuna wale employers ambao wanasema okay, fine, umenifanyia kazi for a number of years, I'd like to take you for a course or two. Alafu sasa ukishapatiwa hiyo empowerment, ndio wewe huyo unaanza kuwa mtukutu, before watu wanajua nini inaendelea, ushamtoka. Sasa how can we handle that situation?
The same thing, Darudia. Different people with different characters. You have to be thankful. Sababu huyo mtu amekuandika and anataka ukuwe empowered. By the way, my employer ndo aliniingiza kwa several organizations which I do now mentorship and facilitation. Unaona? But I'm so thankful to them because in one way or another nimeweza nafanya ile kazi yangu ya domestic work, but at the same time I'm trying to empower other people. Unaona? With what I learned. So it's up to me, usema it's from within. You have to be thankful to your employer. Kuna some very good employers. Niko na a girl which alipata a job. She's paid 30,000. And the employer juu hakuwa amemaliza shule took her back to school, akampeleka hadi driving. So huyo mdem hata ananiambianga hawezi toka kwa hiyo nyumba because the employer has done a lot for her. So it's up to you as a person to know what you can do. Jumi siwezi kudisaidia, but ni vizuri sana unarudi nyuma unakumbuka huyo employer ameni take back to school, nimesoma, nimefanya hizi vitu zote. What can I do for her, ama what can I? Kama unataka kutoka, umepata greener pastures, it's good. Go back, communicate to your employer, mwambie yenyewe nimekufanyia kazi for this long, na sitaki kuacha nyumba yako na madharau. So can I go to find greener pastures? And she will let you go.
Okay, so we have a caller from Roka. Her name is Mary. What's your comment or question?
Okay, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, saying kwamba we're supposed to put boundaries kwa domestic workers wetu, but now I'm asking, what if this domestic worker is also like your relative? She is your relative. How do you put those boundaries?
Ah, that's a pertinent question. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary from Roca. That's actually a very good question. Thank you for calling in. And I'd like Edith to actually handle that. Your domestic worker is your relative that you have an arrangement with. Now, familiarity is already there.
Yeah.
How do you handle this?
For me, it is easy because we are saying, can you come up with, give them a contract because it's employment. You've brought them in so that you can employ them, they provide certain services and you pay them. So formalize that relationship. Let them have a contract which clearly stipulates what work they will be doing and how much you'll be giving them. Whatever the arrangement mkonako, but just make sure that mumeandikiana pahali. And then after that, also make sure that they know their entitlements. Because we have, of course, because of our African culture, we have this scenario a lot. We have a lot of relatives who are here living with the families. Wameletwa kusaidia kazi, or wameletwa as they also look for greener pastures themselves, au waendage college, as you said. So we still do need to structure that relationship. If you don't structure that relationship, I swear itaenda vibaya and it will go beyond the two of you. It will go into the other relatives. Sometimes it goes bad even to the whole village. There's a man who said that he never takes people from his family anawasaidia na akiwapatia pesa kwa nyumba, because the last time he did that, it became a whole community issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it can go very bad. So either way, just structure that relationship, mpatie contract, mwambie muagiri la kitu utakuwa unamlipa, mwisho wa mwezi unamlipa, mpatie entitlements zake, mtreat vizuri, whether it is your relative or not your relative. Just make sure that relationship is formalized and you will not regret. There are many people who have helped their relatives like that. I've also lived with my own relatives, my own sisters. They lived in my house. So, and there's a way we used to relate very formally, as in, wewe unajua kazi yako, unaendaga college. If you're going to college, unaingia, you leave my house maybe at 10. And then you go to college. By 4, I expect you back. So I enforced that in my house and it worked very well. And I know a lot of Kenyans are having it in their house like that.
Okay.
So that we can help our relatives from the village.
All right. Now, Julia, we've talked about empowerment. Umepewa nafasi pia ya kwenda shule ama kufanya kabiashara hapa na pale, na maybe mapato ambao unapewa si mengi sana. Unajua ile minimum wage, kwa sababu kila mtu anaweza kufikisha hiyo 13,000. Sasa kama mtu angalau anakupatia kitu bonus juu ya kile kidogo anakupatia kila mwezi, utachukua ama how do you consider your salary agreement?
Yeah, nitachukua. Na kama mtu amenipea kitu zaidi, kuna wale employers ambao wanajali wafanyikazi wao. Kuna mwingine anasema wewe hujasoma nini, nataka uwe maisha ya chini bado. Lakini kuna wale anakuambia kama hujasoma, hata anaweza chukua mtoto wako na mpeleke shule na msomesha, na akikuongezea kitu kidogo, unajaribu kuinvest. Sio ati unaacha kazi ama nini. Una invest, hata wewe unaendelea, unaweza fungua hata business yako ama uendeleshe masomo. Sio ati kufanya tu kazi ya nyumba, hapo ndio mwisho wa maisha. Unaweza endelesha masomo yako palilifikia. Kwa hivyo kama ni mtu anaweza elewa na anakuinua, mnainuana, itakuwa vyema.
Aha. Now we're bringing this conversation to a close and I'd like to hear from the domestic workers. I'll start off with you, Joyce. Do you feel there are issues that we haven't touched on but are very important for a domestic worker? And if they are addressed, there will be more peace in these homes of this country and beyond?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Are there things that you feel we haven't addressed that are so important na zikiangaliwa angalau kutakuwa na amani kwa nyumba zetu?
Kwa nyumba zetu. One, nasema domestic work is like any other job. So domestic workers should be respected. Domestic work should be taken like any other job. Because if you see, both any other job yoyote ingine yote uko pale ku-earn pesa na kusaidia maybe familia yako. The same way a domestic worker amekuja kukufanyia kazi ili aweze kusaidia familia. So it has to be taken like any other job. Two, we should have a conversation, both the employer and the employee. Let's lay things on the table. Najua contract mingi siku hizi ni verbal. It's not a written contract. Then respect this domestic worker. As I said before, this person is there for you to run your errands at home, for you to earn a living. So let's respect each other. Then let's make sure huyu mtu hata kama umtreat kama watoto wako, don't show them that ni kama an outsider. There will be an outsider for you, and that's why unaona issues kama mtu kuchukua bwana ya mtu, ku-revenge na watoto wa mtu zina happen because they want to revenge. That's not good. But when we have a good relationship, I'm sure everything will go well.
Okay, sawa sawa. Na wewe Julia, tumesema heshima sio utumwa, and it goes both ways. So hata wale domestic workers wafanye nini ndio angalau waendelee kupata mapato na pia nyumba ikae na amani?
Domestic workers wanajaribu sana. Kitu yenye nafanya huenda tusiwe na makubaliano. Pengine mtu mlikubaliana mshahara 10,000. By the end of the month anakupea kama 8,000. Unaona sasa hapo hamtaelewana. Alafu unapata pengine mtu akona mzee na anafanya kazi ya kuishi, utaki kumpea off hata yeye aende kuona mzee wake. Hapo hakutakuwa na maelewano. Ama atakuja atarevenge kwa kuchukua mzee wako kwa maana hujampea nafasi ya kwenda kuhudumia mzee wake. Hivyo ndio unaona sasa kama ni mtu mwenye ako rude, amepitia kwa ile yenye umemnyima off, ndio anafanya hivi. Sasa kuna vitu matajiri wengi hao ndio wanasukuma mwajiriwa kufanya nini kuzifanya.
Na wale ambao waajiriwa wana tabia mbaya, ungetaka kuambiaje?
Mwenye tabia mbaya huyo ni wa tabia mbaya. Na akiwa na tabia mbaya itafika mahali atajulikana kwa all bosses na hatapata kazi. Kwa hivyo tunafanya kazi tukiheshimu hivi house workers kwa maana tunajua ukitoka kwa huyu anaweza kuintroduce kwa mwingine kama umemfanyia vizuri.
Okay.
Maybe I can add something on that.
Yes.
Our employers wako na tabia mbaya. Tafadhali it's a combined effort between the everyone. The employer, the employee na wherever tunaenda kureport hizi cases. Because most of the domestic workers cases ndio unaona hata siku hizi aziripotiwi because they aziandoliwi vile inafaa. Unapata domestic worker amepeleka kesi mahali, ule employer amekuja ametoa kitu kidogo, kesi imeisha hivyo chini ya maji. So the domestic worker anabaki hajalipwa maybe, sawa, amekuwa abused, yani hakuna justice. That's what I say, it's a combined effort between all the stakeholders, the government, the employer and the employees. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Joyce Moikali, who is a domestic worker, Julia Awinja, who is also a domestic worker. Thank you for also giving us an eye into your own lives and how you view that relationship between an employer and a domestic worker. And of course, Jane Kere, who is a counseling psychologist. She's a Dr. Jane Kere with a PhD counseling psychologist, and Edith Murogo, who is a CEO Center for Domestic Training. Now, before I say goodbye, I'm told we still have some full feedback. Watu wanafungua roho sana leo. Agola Linda says, from the onset, discuss with your help your expectations as an employer. There are those helps who prefer the uniform, but none should be forced to wear a uniform. True. Amboko Charles says, ata bibi yangu hanioshei underwear. It's such a disrespect to other humans unless otherwise. Okay, Amboko. Robinson amerudi anasema house help shouldn't be allowed to lay a couple's bed. No wonder many women are losing their husbands to house helps because of such laziness. A house help does all the work, and those with evil hearts use the opportunity to practice witchcraft. Yeah, tumesikia mengi. Eleanor Kev says, that's my job for 4 years. Nasiringi imenitoa fa, though kuna ups and downs kwa wenyewe. Be proud of your hustle. Eleanor is a domestic worker. So yeah, we celebrate you and thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being part of this very crucial conversation. Again, let that conversation continue on that hashtag new normal. Now, tomorrow, we shall actually be focusing on education matters. We'll be looking at the status of education. The students by now, we are in February, have settled in after many months of being out of school. However, there seems to be some deviant behavior that is rearing its ugly head. Why and what can we do to instill sanity back in our education system? We find out tomorrow from 7 a.m. See you then.